our shirt on Teespring.
The United States, a nation founded on the principles of religious freedom, finds itself grappling with a troubling paradox: a resurgence of violence fueled by religious intolerance. This unsettling trend manifests in various forms, from hate crimes targeting places of worship to acts of terrorism committed in the name of God. This essay delves into the multifaceted phenomenon of religious violence in the U.S., examining its historical roots, the ideologies that fuel it, and its devastating impact on individuals and communities. Recent years have witnessed a disturbing surge in attacks on religious institutions. Synagogues, mosques, churches, none have been immune to the scourge of hate-driven violence. These attacks, often perpetrated by individuals with extremist views, underscore the fragility of religious harmony in a society increasingly polarized along religious lines. The desecration of sacred spaces strikes at the very core of religious communities, leaving behind a trail of fear, anger, and a profound sense of vulnerability. Beyond the physical damage, these acts of violence leave deep emotional scars on individuals and communities. The psychological toll is immeasurable, eroding trust, fostering division, and creating an atmosphere of fear that can linger long after the headlines fade. The rise of religious violence demands our attention, compelling us to confront the underlying currents of intolerance and hatred that threaten the very fabric of American society. The urgency of this issue cannot be overstated. Understanding the factors that contribute to religious violence is crucial to developing effective strategies for prevention and intervention. This requires a nuanced approach that acknowledges the complex interplay of religious beliefs, social tensions, and political rhetoric in fostering an environment where such violence can take root and flourish. The targeting of places of worship is particularly egregious, as these spaces hold deep spiritual and communal significance. Churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples serve as sanctuaries for prayer, reflection, and community gatherings. An attack on such a space is not merely an attack on a building, it is an assault on the very heart of a community's identity and sense of belonging. The desecration of religious symbols, disruption of services, and acts of vandalism or arson inflict both physical and psychological harm. They sow seeds of fear and mistrust, making individuals hesitant to express their faith openly or gather in their sacred spaces. This chilling effect can undermine the fundamental right to freedom of religion, creating a climate of apprehension and curtailing the open practice and celebration of diverse faiths. The motivations behind these attacks vary, often stemming from a toxic mix of religious intolerance, bigotry, and political extremism. Perpetrators may harbor deep-seated prejudices against specific religious groups, viewing them as a threat to their own beliefs or way of life. In some cases, attacks on places of worship are intended to send a message of intimidation or dominance, asserting the superiority of one group over another. Combating this form of religious violence requires a multi-pronged approach. Law enforcement agencies must prioritize the investigation and prosecution of hate crimes, sending a clear message that such acts will not be tolerated. Equally important are efforts to promote interfaith dialogue and understanding, fostering empathy and respect across religious divides. By building bridges of communication and cooperation, communities can create a more inclusive and resilient society that values diversity and rejects all forms of hate. Terrorism, motivated by religious extremism, poses a significant threat to global security and stability. In the United States, while instances of homegrown religious terrorism are less frequent than other forms of violence, they leave an indelible mark on the national psyche. These acts, often driven by a distorted interpretation of religious texts or a belief in apocalyptic scenarios, instill fear and sow discord within communities. One of the most prominent examples of religiously motivated terrorism in recent U.S. history is the Oklahoma City bombing of 1995. Perpetrated by anti-government extremists with ties to Christian identity ideology, the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building resulted in the deaths of 168 people, including 19 children. This horrific act of violence highlighted the dangers of extremist ideologies that exploit religion to justify violence and terror. More recently, the rise of ISIS-inspired terrorism has posed new challenges for law enforcement and intelligence agencies. While ISIS has lost its territorial control in the Middle East, its ideology continues to inspire individuals and small groups to carry out attacks in the West. The internet and social media have become potent tools for radicalization, enabling extremist groups to spread their message of hate and incite violence among vulnerable individuals. Addressing the threat of religious terrorism requires a comprehensive approach that encompasses both security measures and counter-narrative initiatives. Law enforcement agencies must work diligently to detect and disrupt potential threats, while also engaging in community outreach to build trust and counter extremist recruitment efforts. Education and interfaith dialogue play a crucial role in challenging extremist ideologies and promoting a more nuanced understanding of religion and its role in society. Extremist ideologies, often cloaked in religious rhetoric, serve as a dangerous breeding ground for violence and intolerance. These ideologies, found across the religious spectrum, distort and manipulate religious teachings to justify their hateful agendas. They thrive on fear, division, and a sense of grievance, often targeting marginalized communities and promoting a worldview that demonizes those who do not share their beliefs. White supremacist groups, for example, often espouse a warped interpretation of Christianity, claiming that white people are God's chosen people and that other races are inferior. This twisted theology has fueled countless acts of violence and discrimination against racial and ethnic minorities throughout U.S. history. The Ku Klux Klan, with its history of lynchings, bombings, and intimidation tactics, stands as a chilling reminder of the deadly consequences of such extremist beliefs. Similarly, Islamic extremism, as espoused by groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, presents a distorted and violent interpretation of Islam. These groups exploit religious texts and narratives to justify their acts of terrorism and violence, seeking to establish a global caliphate through force and intimidation. Their ideology, based on a narrow and intolerant worldview, rejects pluralism, tolerance, and the fundamental tenets of peaceful coexistence. Countering extremist ideologies requires a multifaceted approach that addresses both the ideological roots and the social conditions that allow such ideologies to flourish. Educational initiatives that promote critical thinking skills, media literacy, and interfaith dialogue are essential to inoculating individuals against extremist propaganda. Addressing underlying social and economic inequalities can also help to reduce the appeal of extremist groups, who often exploit feelings of marginalization and disenfranchisement to recruit new members. Section 5. Echoes of the Past, Historical Religious Conflicts. The United States, despite its ideals of religious freedom, has a long and troubled history marked by religious conflicts and persecution. From the persecution of early religious minorities like Quakers and Baptists to the anti-Catholic riots of the 19th century, religious intolerance has cast a long shadow over the nation's past. These historical events, though painful to confront, offer valuable lessons about the dangers of religious prejudice and the importance of safeguarding religious liberty for all. One of the most well-known examples of historical religious conflict in the U.S. is the persecution of Mormons in the 19th century. Driven by theological differences and social anxieties, Mormons faced widespread discrimination, mob violence, and even expulsion from their homes. The Mountain Meadows Massacre of 1857, in which a Mormon militia attacked a wagon train of emigrants, stands as a stark reminder of the brutal consequences of religious intolerance. The legacy of past religious conflicts continues to shape the present, reminding us of the importance of vigilance in protecting religious freedom and promoting tolerance. Understanding the historical context of religious prejudice can help us to identify and address contemporary manifestations of intolerance and discrimination. Moreover, acknowledging past injustices is essential for reconciliation and healing. Truth and reconciliation commissions, public apologies, and educational initiatives that shed light on these dark chapters in U.S. history can help to foster understanding, empathy, and a shared commitment to preventing future atrocities. Section 6. The Scars of Persecution. Religious persecution leaves deep and lasting scars on individuals, communities, and societies. It takes many forms, from subtle acts of discrimination to overt violence, all aimed at marginalizing, silencing, or eliminating those who hold different beliefs. The psychological trauma inflicted by persecution can be profound, leading to fear, anxiety, distrust, and a diminished sense of belonging. For individuals, religious persecution can result in loss of livelihood, social isolation, physical and emotional abuse, and even displacement from their homes and communities. The constant fear of being targeted for their beliefs can have a debilitating effect on their lives, hindering their ability to practice their faith openly and participate fully in society. Communities subjected to persecution often experience a breakdown of social cohesion and trust. Fear and suspicion can become pervasive, leading to internal divisions and hindering collective action to address the persecution. This can create a vicious cycle where marginalized communities are further isolated and disempowered. Moreover, religious persecution can have broader societal implications, undermining social stability, economic development, and the very fabric of a pluralistic society. When individuals and communities are targeted for their beliefs, it erodes the fundamental human rights of freedom of religion, expression, and assembly, creating a climate of fear and intolerance that affects everyone. Section 7. Discrimination, the seeds of discord. Religious discrimination, while often less overt than violence, can be equally insidious, sowing seeds of discord and resentment that can ultimately lead to conflict. It manifests in various forms, from subtle biases and stereotypes to outright exclusion from employment, housing, education, and other essential services. In the workplace, individuals may face discrimination based on their religious attire, practices, or beliefs. They may be denied promotions, passed over for job opportunities, or subjected to harassment from colleagues or supervisors. Such discrimination not only violates their rights but also creates a hostile work environment, hindering their professional advancement and overall well-being. In educational institutions, students from minority religious backgrounds may encounter discrimination in admissions, curriculum content, or extracurricular activities. They may be bullied or ostracized by their peers or face prejudice from teachers or administrators. Such experiences can have a detrimental effect on their academic performance, social development, and sense of self-worth. Addressing religious discrimination requires a multi-pronged approach that encompasses legal protections, educational initiatives, and social awareness campaigns. Anti-discrimination laws are crucial for ensuring equal opportunity and protecting individuals from discrimination based on their religion. However, legal remedies alone are not sufficient. Section 8. The toxic nexus of religion and politics. The intersection of religion and politics has long been a volatile mix, often exploited to justify discrimination, violence, and oppression. When religious beliefs are intertwined with political agendas, it can create a toxic environment where dissent is stifled, and those who hold different views are demonized. This dangerous nexus has fueled countless conflicts throughout history and continues to pose a significant threat to peace and stability in the present day. In the United States, the rise of Christian nationalism has raised concerns about the erosion of the separation of church and state and the potential for religious intolerance. Christian nationalism, which seeks to impose a narrow and exclusionary vision of America as a Christian nation, often promotes discriminatory policies and rhetoric that target religious minorities, LGBTQ+ individuals, and other marginalized groups. The use of religion to justify political violence is another disturbing manifestation of this toxic nexus. Extremist groups, both domestic and foreign, have exploited religious rhetoric to recruit followers, incite hatred, and legitimize acts of terrorism. Addressing the toxic nexus of religion and politics requires a steadfast commitment to upholding the separation of church and state, promoting religious freedom for all, and challenging the use of religion to justify discrimination and violence. This includes holding elected officials accountable for their rhetoric and policies, supporting organizations that advocate for religious freedom and pluralism, and engaging in constructive dialogue across religious and political divides. Section 9. The unfinished battle for peace. The fight against religious violence is an ongoing battle, one that requires constant vigilance, education, and a commitment to building a more just and equitable society. While laws and policies are essential for deterring and punishing acts of violence, they alone cannot address the underlying prejudices and ideologies that fuel such hatred. Interfaith dialogue and cooperation are crucial for fostering understanding, empathy, and respect across religious divides. By engaging in open and honest conversations about our differences and shared values, we can break down stereotypes, build bridges of communication, and create a more inclusive society where everyone feels valued and respected. Education plays a vital role in preventing religious violence by equipping individuals with the knowledge, critical thinking skills, and empathy to challenge prejudice and discrimination. By teaching students about different religious traditions, promoting media literacy, and fostering a culture of respect and understanding, we can empower future generations to become agents of peace and tolerance. The quest for religious harmony is a collective endeavor that requires the active participation of individuals, communities, and institutions. By working together, we can create a world where everyone is free to practice their faith without fear of persecution or discrimination, and where diversity is celebrated as a source of strength and enrichment.